So step
Great.
away, you have the step.
Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be here in my home office attending the RDA. I certainly wish I was in Edinburgh. I'm sure we all do. So perhaps in 6 months we will be together in another RDA meeting. I have a lot of things to talk about, and I will jettison activities if I run out of time, but the slides will be available for everybody. So if I don't cover all of the topics, that's okay. Hopefully you'll be able to look at them later. There's a lot of great links there. So I'm going to start with some compelling use cases of why RDA is important and why data science and data management is important to NIH. As you know, in January of 2023, we will be implementing our data management and sharing plan and policy. And our researchers, a lot of our researchers who hold R1 or center grants or other types of grants will need to submit their data management and sharing plan. So how will they put their fair data practices and principles into practice? Where will they start and what will they do? You can see this researchers frustrated. Researchers who are studying rare diseases like pediatric cancer are especially challenged because there's no one single resource that has enough of the data to allow identifications of causal variants on their own. And often, research participants could be duplicated across different systems. So just finding the data necessary to do your research, particularly on pediatric studies, is challenging. Data scientist or AI engineer. As you know, AI has great potential to help scientists make sense of the vast quantities of data being generated. But how do we actually do that? How do we make AI data? What are some of the capabilities that we can enable? So these are just some of the challenges that I'll talk about today. And really the goal is to go from a frustrated researcher to a researcher who's actively engaged in data science to success. Probably many folks have seen this before, a vision of integrating fair data across the biomedical data ecosystem. This is just an image, and this actually came from a pilot we ran with Figshare that I'll talk about in a little bit. But it's the idea that I think you all believe that data that's in journals can be linked to data within the repositories, findable through metadata that are computable, and then finally also brought together with the codes or the interactive notebooks that help make the analysis of those data feasible. There's a lot of progress in this area. I'm just going to highlight a little bit, and if I miss something, I do apologize, but there's a lot of work going on in RDA and other communities to link data in repositories and embed those within the corresponding journal publications or collections, and this is just a few of the activities within our scientific publication community, within the community of the library sciences, and other related efforts. Biodata Catalyst, Biodata Caddy, which was funded by the BD2K program, PubMed, Fair Sharing Working Group, for example. And many of these efforts are working within a community of repositories for greater discoverability. Recommender or machine readable metadata. There was many great sessions actually on metadata for greater discoverability. There's a lot of activities going on within RDA and other communities, Crossref, Fair Sharing again, and within societies such as the American Mathematical Society and NIH's efforts in cloud interoperability platform, which I'll talk a little bit about. Standards are emerging for minimal metadata for discoverability, sort of like creating those common data elements and common data models for studies. And finally, there's some pretty exciting activities happening in for example, PLOS Comp Bio, where now you can actually link different coding environments or interactive figures within the article itself using, for example, NeuroLibra or MyBinder or other interactive figures such as Plotly. So how can we at NIH support all this really wonderful ground-up activity, enhance it, and bring it to fruition? So this is a figure developed by Kim Pruitt from NCBI that shows sort of the life cycle of data resources, starting from their introductory phase, all the way growth through maturity, and then finally, when often could happen, the declining phase, and then the decision point to reinvest or to move forward. And I want to talk about different stages in this data resource lifecycle, from introductory to maturity. How can we support data repositories to enable them for greater data usability and greater data sharing? It's critical for repositories to have that sort of funding opportunities to enable them to achieve trust and fair principles, and to elevate them to greater usability, utility, and impact. So this supports our NIH data management and sharing policy. There's a number of working groups at NIH working on this activity, and you can see it on the right side, different working groups in lifecycle metrics and data repositories and knowledge bases and fair data repositories. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the opportunity to develop an ecosystem for a range of different repositories, both community-driven repositories and generalist repositories, to really maximize those assets. Just recently, we issued a supplement to support existing repositories funded by NIH to better enable their data discoverability, their interoperability, and their reuse. And the goal is to help those repositories to align to the desirable characteristics of repositories, and to strengthen their adoption of fair principles, to strengthen their adoption of trust principles, and to enhance and contribute to community-led metrics, standards, or best practices to enable greater use, usability, and impact for that resource throughout its life cycle. This funding supplement is due to NIH by May 20th, so I hope that those of you who are interested will consider applying. This is just a little bit of a chart that describes the OSTP desired characteristics for data repositories. Many of these align to the activities in RDA, including unique persistent identifiers, plans for long-term sustainability, robust metadata, free and easy access to data, broad measured in terms of reuse, for example. And then there's, on the bottom line, characteristics for data repositories that have human participant data. Thank you so much, Ingrid, for the reuse of your wonderful slide with the really wonderful graphics. These are just some of the activities that we would hope would be supported through this initiative in terms of findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, and in terms of the trust principles for transparency, responsibility, user-focused, sustainability, and technology. When thinking about data resources, it's great to support resources to get up to that maturity level, but once they're mature, we still need to support them. So we have a number of funding opportunities to support data repositories and knowledge bases. We just want to highlight this one. As you know, data resources are important tools for research. They're usually historically funded through many different types of mechanisms at NIH, which is often difficult for the repositories to align as resources and not as, for example, R1 grants. So we've optimized the funding mechanism to support resources. The end goal is really to give researchers and the repositories confidence in data integrity and management. So when submitting an application for an NIH repository or a knowledge base, there are four main components: the scientific impact both within the community and across the domain, community engagement, including engagement with the relevant journals that support the data in these repositories, assessments of quality, service and efficiency, and finally governance. These are the two funding announcements that I would like to draw your attention to. They are designed specifically for biomedical data repositories and for biomedical knowledge bases. They are reviewed separately as a resource, and they are supported by a number, but not all of our NIH institutes and centers. So you'll want to look carefully at those funding announcements to make sure that your scientific domain aligns with the institutes that are supporting these repositories. Of course, this is a pilot project, so we're learning lessons and gaining insights and information, and we would like to reissue this with some adjustments in the future. I want to talk a little bit about generalist repositories. All of the work that I've mentioned before is really repositories that align to institute and centers at NIH's missions and goals, but there are a number of important generalist repositories Last year, we did a pilot with Figshare to learn how researchers would engage with general repositories, what are the important activities that general repositories contribute to our data science initiatives. And so the pilot focused on expert-guided metadata for improvement, documentation of NIH customized metadata, and support for larger files. Of all of the 27 institutes and centers at NIH, 22 of these supported this pilot. And what was nice for us was that there was a fairly large uptake from our intramural NIH researchers as well as the extramural community. You can see by the size of the block the institutes that participated in this pilot. This is a figure that was shared with me by the Figshare group after the pilot ended. So you can see that during the pilot, we had a number of references and citations from the data that was supported in this pilot. And since the pilot ended, there have been an increase in the total number of references of those data. So 13 of these references occurred in papers published since the pilot concluded. This is certainly a good metric for us to understand how the researchers are using data in generalist repositories. One of the things that that came out of the pilot, as well as a community-based workshop, was the role of generalist repositories and the concept of co-opetition. That is, where it makes sense to collaborate and common and shared goals. Those could be core metadata, identifiers, authentication, et cetera. And where it makes sense to compete, to do so uniquely within each of those repositories, dashboards, visualizations, analytics, linking data, for example. I'm really happy to say that we're going to continue exploring and working with our repositories on the concept of co-opetition. And I really look forward to this activity and starting this year and hopefully starting this summer. I want to also call out, based on the work that happened in our generalist repository workshop, there's a really lovely comparison chart on fairsharing.org. And thank you so much to our co-chairs, Dr. Shelley Stahl and Marianne Matone, for their work on the workshop and their continued support of this activity through fairsharing.org. I think I have a little time, so I want to tell you about creating ways in which we can search, find, and hopefully bring data together for a larger data ecosystem. There's, as you can see, there's many data in many different repositories, including large repositories that are supported by NIH. And you can see those in the Bubble Cloud, Anvil, Biodata Catalyst, Kids First, Cancer Commons Research Framework, for example. Allowing scientific inquiry across multimodal, multi-temporal data and across platforms is definitely a goal. It's sort of like a holy grail goal. It's really quite hard, but the work that we're doing to support cloud platform interoperability aims to establish the guidance and the technical standards and actual capabilities for researchers to use data across cloud platforms. There are a number of platforms that are working together on this goal. You can see them all listed here. Some of the early work that they're doing includes generic searches and handoffs of data across the platforms. I'm pointing down here to the link that shows you that you can actually see a bird's eye view of all the data sets, at least from the 4 main platforms that I mentioned earlier, to get a sense of what data is out there. Bringing it together is something that we're still working on, but I think that we'll have great progress within the next year or two. To start that work of bringing data together, you probably have heard us talk about the sort of one sign-on researcher auth services. We've deployed this actually quite a while ago. We're now almost on phase 3, but it allows researchers the ability to log in once, see the data across the different platforms, and through a Visa system, have access to the data that you've already gone through the data access request process for. This is, for researchers, it's a transparent effort. It required a lot of systems work behind the scenes at NIH, but I'm really happy to say that it's incorporated into our ERA Commons and our logging credentialing system. Our early path forward for interoperability. This is a problem statement. I've talked a little bit about pediatric cancers. It's very difficult to find those data. They're often across different platforms. Here, the use case is data that's stored both in the top MedBio data catalyst and in the Gabrielle Milliken's first pediatric program. Working together to bring that data together in either portal or either interface is something that is an early pilot that's moving forward. Oh, this is just a little note that we also enhance software. There is a NOSI to support the software development, software engineering for tools to enable greater open science. This is also to encourage software to become cloud ready. It's not required that you work with Strides, but certainly we would encourage that, and the due date is on May 15th. I do have a little time to talk about the work we're doing in AI. There's so much potential to bring large data sets together and make them AI ready. And I want to tell you a little bit about some of the work. From the advisory council to the director, the recommendations to us were make data collections reusable and analyzable with ML and AI applications, which would require, in their words, data sheets and model cards, provide ethical principles for ethics, accountability, and representation, and finally attract people in the AI, ML, biomedical sciences. So what are we doing to actually realize those recommendations? The first program is Bridge to AI. It's data generation centers. We will create flagship data sets and the necessary standards and tools and rubrics to drive AI biomedicine. The dedicated modules include data acquisition, teaming, standards, tools, and workforce development. And then there's a bridging center that will integrate across all of these data generation centers. It will focus on teaming, standards, tools, and workforce development. The notice of intent to publish is linked here. If you're interested in AI and interested in Bridge to AI, I do hope that you will explore those two notices of intent to publish, and I believe the funding announcements will go out soon. In my particular office, where I work to catalyze data science across NIH, we have three main areas that we will be working on starting in FY21 and through FY25, addressing workforce gaps in data governance or data science for AI and biomedicine, new ways to bring together researchers who will be trained at the interface of information science, AI, biomedical science, computer science. New frameworks and tools to allow for guidance in creating human and machine-readable data sets and model cards as recommended by the ACD AI Working Group. And finally, ways to improve existing AI data. So data that has been supported by NIH but is not necessarily AI ready. Ways to impugn, for example, enhanced metadata or other capabilities. And for that, there is a supplement to create new educational activities and to develop the competencies and skills needed to make biomedical data fair and AI ready. The due date is on May 14th. I hope you'll look at this as well. Here we're looking at curriculum development and training modules that integrate different types of communities, including information sciences, computer sciences, and biomedical sciences. And ways to improve the readiness and fair supported AI data. So this is, again, another supplement. It brings experts trained in biomedical data management and artificial intelligence together to make the NIH-supported data more user and usable for AI analytics. I've sort of given you a very fast run through of some of the many activities that we are doing within NIH to support data science and infrastructure and modernizing a data ecosystem, developing robust data management tools and analytics, and enhancing our workforce and sustaining our activities through fair data practices. Just a bit of a highlight. We do have a seminar. We run this the second Friday of every month. If you're interested, Dr. Deanna Taylor, Director of Bioinformatics, will talk about integrating common fund data sets for future selection and machine learning. So I hope that you'll join us on May 14th. I'm also pleased to announce that we are supporting RDA as an organizational member. There are many good reasons why we would partner with RDA, not the least of which is that you provide a broad community to help us understand ways in which we can instantiate data management and best sharing practices. You develop great working groups. You're a ground-up organization that will foster adoption of community-based standards and activities. And I think with that, it is the end. And I hope I've left at least a few questions, time for questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Susan. And it looks like our technical glitch has been resolved.
Oh, I didn't know I had a technical glitch. I'm so sorry.
It wasn't you. It wasn't you. It was just before there was a very prominent echo suddenly appeared on the audio. And people commented it was like watching Doctor Who. Anyway, thank you ever so much, Susan, for that interesting talk. Lots of fascinating things that NIH are doing, and we're really pleased to hear about that. There's one question in the Q&A, if you have a look. Does NIH have a sustainability or maintenance plan or program for data repositories and related infrastructure?
The closest we have to sustaining data repos is the funding announcement that I linked to, the data resource and data repository funding announcement. It is renewable, but it is not a lifetime guarantee. As all funding activities at NIH, they do have renewal capabilities, and if it's something that the community supports, it's something that the review and the institute supports, then I imagine that it would continue to receive funding according to the priorities of the institutes that are hosting those. But there's no sustained, there's no forever. It's always an application with a renewal.
Thank you. Okay, well, with that, we're pretty much exactly on the hour. So thank you again, Susan, for a fascinating talk. And I will hand over to Rachel now to introduce our second speaker.
Thank you very much, Susan and Juan. So I'm Rachel Bruce. I popped into the meeting at various times. So I'm from UK Research and Innovation, one of the co-hosts of this RDA plenary. And it's my great pleasure to introduce our final keynote speaker, Professor Richard Gold from McGill University in Canada. Richard is Director of the Centre of Intellectual Property Policy, and he's an associate of the Department of Genetics. He works on many different things, but he's undertaken a lot of activity around enabling open science and open science partnerships in various initiatives as part of the innovation process. So I think, in keeping with the conference theme about data meeting global challenges, it will be fascinating to hear what Richard has to share around some of his activities. So without further ado, I shall hand over to Richard. But before I do, as with Susan's session, please do put questions in the Q&A box, and we listeners, I think you probably all get used to this now. You can vote on them, and those that rise to the top, we can hopefully pick up. We'll hopefully have time. So welcome, Richard.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Hopefully everybody could see my slides. If you cannot, let me know.
I can't quite.
I'm going to be talking a little bit broader than just sharing data, but what I'm saying follows very well on Susan's talk. But I'm going to talk about why sharing is not enough, essentially, why we need to go to the next step of open science and really think about how we can use the fact that we have access to so much information and tools, etc., to accelerate research and bring down costs. I'm going to start at the end so that if you are tired because it's the end of the day or you want to sign off early, you get the message, and then I'll walk you through it. So, as I said, sharing data is wonderful, and it's taken us a long time to get to the point we are now, where we have infrastructure and other things available to allow us to share. But it doesn't solve all of our problems. There are still barriers that exist. One is the use of data. Do we have freedom to operate to use that data and materials and tools in every way we want to? We also have to make sure that we are actually sharing the materials. So sometimes we only share data sets. We don't share the tools that underlie it, nor the materials that are needed that generated that data and to use that data. We also have barriers to building consortia. So yes, a lot of people can access the data, but can they do so together? Can we rely on the multiplicity of skills and values and incentives, et cetera, to really advance research? And openness is a start, but not the end. And then one of the trickier parts is, can we take on more risk? How do we get firms and researchers to jump out of their comfort zone and actually take risk? How do we spread that risk so that more people are willing to jump in? As I'll come back to, this is a growing problem, not only in the life sciences, but in all scientific areas. And then finally, how do we go from open sharing into products and tools and goods that businesses are willing to invest in? So how do we develop business models that are built on openness and therefore, the last point, generate competition? If we don't remove these barriers or address them, then we will see a continuing decline in productivity. The productivity per unit we generate, whether it be a paper, a new drug, a new agricultural seed, is declining. That is, over time, we're getting less and less out of our innovation products. And at the same time, the cost of generating those products are growing and growing exponentially. So right now, we see lots of innovation, but that's because we're plowing in so much money that we're offsetting the lower productivity per unit. Governments can't sustain this forever. Industry can't sustain it forever. And one of the consequences is that people, whether firms or in academia, move away from risky types of research. That is, they don't take on novel projects as much. And so we see an increase in the percentage of non-novel innovation. It does add knowledge, but it's not really breaking through than we did a while ago. And so I'm going to argue that we need institutional structures to help address this. And the one I'm going to be talking about, and it's only one, is the Open Science Partnership. It is an institutional structure that has many institutions, usually a public-private, could be philanthropy, governments, universities, firms, large, small, and across different sectors. So in the area that I study of biomedicine, it could also include AI firms. We also need, through these structures, we can facilitate open access to data, knowledge, and materials. It provides the structure for sharing. They avoid restrictive patenting, so an intellectual property right that would prevent other people from being able to use the information. And they rely on a set of incentives that overcomes some of the problems we see today. So that's the bottom line. And if you want to tune out now, that's fine. You got my basic point. But let me walk you through this a little bit more carefully. So I'm going to be talking about, again, why open access is not sufficient in itself. What are open science partnerships? How do they work? And I'm going to talk to you specifically about 3 examples in the health space: the Structural Genomics Consortium, the Montreal Neurological Institute, and one that we've just started called VIMI in Canada, ready internationally. Okay, so I decided to go for pictures rather than words. You're probably tired of seeing words by now. So why is open access not sufficient at the present time? Well, there are some major lacuna in the environment that we live in. First of all, openness does not guarantee freedom to operate. If we don't share data in a way that's fair, we already know that that data is not reusable. But on top of it, we need to ensure there's freedom to operate, that people can actually use that information, use those tools to produce products and services that don't violate intellectual property rights. If they do, then firms will move away. So that's number one. We need to generate freedom to operate, and sharing doesn't do that by itself. We also have to deal with transaction costs. The cost of doing research, of entering into consortia, the cost of exchanging information, the cost of translating knowledge into a product or service, those block investments. And if we don't have a mechanism to really reduce those, then we're going to see a continuation of this loss of productivity. And I'll give you some examples of that as well. And then, as I said, we need to deal with the incentives to create goods and take on risk. Okay, so I'm going to talk about first freedom to operate. Freedom to operate just means you are free to go ahead and do what you want. And it has two components. One is the nature of knowledge, accessing knowledge, and the second is the legal right to use it. So let's focus on accessing all knowledge. Open access is really good about sharing what we call explicit knowledge or codified knowledge, things that we can write down, put in charts, put on blogs, that we can communicate through written and diagrams and so on. What it's not good at is facilitating the exchange of tacit knowledge. Knowledge that comes about through interpersonal exchange that we either don't have the time or don't have the language or don't have the facility to put into some type of written communication. It's when you walk into a lab and understand how that lab operates. What are the rules of operation? It is understanding, when you look at a molecule, the different ways you can modify it and have a sense of which one is likely to work and not. It might be about the kinds of partners that exist out there with whom you can work with. And one very good example is, the way I'm speaking to you right now. Normally, I would be speaking and seeing your faces, and your expressions or talking to one another would tell me whether you are getting what I'm saying, whether I'm communicating clearly. I have no ability to see that now. So I don't have access to that tacit knowledge, and I just have to hope that what I'm saying is resonating with you. This knowledge is incredibly important, especially as we move to cutting-edge research, where we're trying to advance the science in a way that we haven't before, because there are a whole bunch of hypotheses and different ways of doing things, but none of it is codified. So one example of this is the Ontario Institute for Cancer Research. It is publicly owned, but has a mixed mandate of doing research, but also commercializations. And it worked with another institution I'll talk about later, the Structural Genomics Consortium. And it agreed within this consortium to make a probe for a new protein, WDR5. So this had been an uninvestigated protein before, and OICR and the SGC agreed that they're going to create a probe. This is a molecule that basically attaches to this protein, and make it publicly available. That is, no intellectual property rights, freely shared, sending out this molecule to whoever wanted it. And two things happened. First, they were able to send it out and get it validated. And this will come back to the incentive part. But because no one was making money, researchers, top researchers, were willing to investigate the probe. They found it wanting. They went back therefore and developed a better probe. So it increased quickly the quality of what was being put out there. If the OICR had put out its initial probe, all the research that followed would have been tainted because it wasn't as good. And that happens many times when we've got proprietary tools. The probe went around the world to various labs. One lab found a link between the WDR5 protein and leukemia. OICR then modified this open, freely available molecule and patented it, and started taking it through some trials, eventually licensing it out to Celgene in the largest preclinical deal in Canadian history. Now, anybody could have taken the probe and modified it. So why was this so valuable? Well, the value here is that OICR had access to the tacit knowledge about what was happening, what was likely to happen, and were primed to translate that knowledge into a commercial product. They probably cut off at least 2 years on product development because they had access to this tacit knowledge. So here we have a completely open system, no patents, translating into a commercial opportunity that was only available because the researchers had access to the tacit knowledge. So putting data out there, anybody could have done this, but they didn't. And the reason they didn't is they didn't have access to this information. The second aspect is legal freedom to operate. So while I might be able to access the data, and I might be able to, depending on your jurisdiction, use it in research without being afraid of being sued, at some point, a firm is, if I want to come out with a new product, a firm is likely to get involved. Our universities are not currently structured to really take a drug all the way to market. And their decision will be based on freedom to operate. So if their decision to do research will be dependent on freedom to operate. If they see a lot of patents out there, they may just say, look, the risk is too high, the cost is too high, I don't feel like licensing, especially when I'm doing cutting edge research where there's tons of uncertainty about whether I'll ever get to the result. And so the firms will simply not go down that path. And if they don't go down that path, it essentially means that we are not getting the research done. Yes, we can do the preliminary versions in the university, but it will go nowhere because we can't work with the industry. So we need to find ways to solve this legal freedom to operate. And there are a few different ways. One is just radical sharing. So this fits within the general openness and open access. If all actors radically share data and results and potential pathways, then that will prevent others from patenting as long as everything is revealed and is revealed quickly. So that helps, but there's still opportunities for some actors to patent along the way. So the second way to do it is to get agreement among the leading actors not to patent. And you can do this within an institution. So you agree among all the actors within a consortium that the things we do together will not be patented. And that goes further than just radical sharing. The two work well together. And then another alternative or supplement to that is to share knowledge broadly, and that so that anybody who's threatened to be sued can use that knowledge to undermine patents. And the railway industry in the US did this in the 19th century to prevent patentees from blocking the development of the railway industry. Another thing that we need to deal with, as I said, is the fact that research is delayed, the transaction costs of getting research started and the cost of doing the research themselves. It naturally takes time to put a project together. They just don't come out of the sky fully formed, so we have to work together. But beyond that, there is a cost of simply getting into legal agreements with a bunch of universities, with philanthropies, and with firms. And that requires negotiation. And the one thing we know is negotiation over intellectual property rights, especially with universities, is particularly difficult. Firms repeatedly say that this slows down research startup by 6 months, a year, or more. Researchers find the same thing in dealing with their technology transfer offices. So this is a major concern. And there are some ways to deal with it. So there's a Lambert set of agreements in the UK. That helps. But there's still IP to negotiate because you have to pick which Lambert agreement and so on. There's also on the back end, a translation to an individual firm. So if there's intellectual property being generated within the consortium, there are costs at the beginning and there are costs at the end caused by intellectual property. Well, this would be okay if there was convincing or even moderate levels of evidence that university patenting contributed to levels of innovation, to new products and services getting on the market. But there isn't. The data is quite the contrary. So while there are certainly examples of products that get to market through patents, the empirical evidence looking at years of history show that in fact that the patents do not accelerate innovation. So we get the cost of having to patent, one of the increasing costs at universities, litigation over IP. We get all those costs without any benefits. So we get slower research, we get slower translation, and we get increased cost for what we can tell no benefit. Another issue is incentives. So a firm relying on patents has an incentive to patent, and therefore they set up their research to generate patents. Makes sense? The problem is that risky endeavors are less likely to generate patents. And so if you're being evaluated as a manager based on generating patents, you will naturally turn to the types of endeavors that will generate patents, that is lower risk research that will do something. Me Too drugs, for example, you will get a patent, it will have a certain value, and you will be rewarded. But if you take on high risk research, you may discover nothing, or you may discover that it doesn't work. Well, therefore you don't generate a patent, and your competitors all get to watch you make a mistake and they save the money. So generating patents does not lead firms to take on as much risk. On the academic front, we're all looking increasingly at impact factor. Well, impact factor looks at your last or 2 years worth of citations. What we know from the literature is that truly novel research often takes 5 to 9 years to really generate the types of citations that demonstrate that it was truly novel. The first 2 years generally doesn't generate that. So again, researchers are moved to safe places where they will get short-term citations, but they're not generating novelty. So we have a misalignment of incentives. Okay, so how do we solve that? It's obvious, or from what I'm saying, is we need ways to bring people together in a way that brings down costs and that doesn't lead us into very narrow sets of incentives. And the Open Science Partnership is one mechanism that I proposed and have looked at to accomplish this. These are structured to facilitate access to tacit knowledge, engage in radical sharing, simplify negotiations through the elimination of IP as an issue, and address the incentive problems. They are usually, as I said at the beginning, multi-sector collaborations, public-private partnerships with multi-sectorial actors from even within the firms. You will have big pharma, small pharma, AI firms, and others, all of who are participating with university researchers, government labs, and so on. The thing that distinguishes them from open science in general is that they have a clear purpose, a joint purpose. So they can draw a circle around their activities. Those purposes are usually fairly broad, coming up with drugs for Alzheimer's or antimicrobial resistance. So there are different routes that can get there, but there's a common purpose and people agree that that's the purpose and they join together for that purpose. So it provides a way to identify actors who are part of the consortium and help allocate resources. They involve radical sharing. So data and tools are shared rapidly, and as I said, no IP. They also provide a mechanism to get over negotiations, as I said, by eliminating IP. And what this does in practice is facilitates tacit knowledge sharing, because now my postdoc who's in an academic lab or my PhD student who's writing a thesis can go and work inside of a firm knowing that intellectual property is not going to inhibit her ability to publish in the end. So it makes that knowledge exchange much easier. Everybody knows the rules of the game. There are no intellectual properties. I don't have to negotiate. There are no red zones that you cannot talk about with others. So it facilitates tacit knowledge exchange. It reduces the cost, particularly of smaller entities, to join. So like SMEs or AI firms that might not join generally into a large consortium dealing with drug discovery, because the cost of entry are so low, they'll come in. That increases the diversity of knowledge, including tacit knowledge. It increases the speed of project start because we can easily implement standard form contracts. We're not negotiating over the most contentious component, intellectual property. And because there's access to the tacit knowledge and no intellectual property blocking further development, it allows for accelerated translation of that knowledge into products or services. It also has a geographic component. Sharing tacit knowledge does usually require some type of interpersonal connection. And so you tend to see these centers where people come and they exchange knowledge, and that allows for other economic benefits, because let's say I have a postdoc who's gone into a firm and comes back, that person may say, well, I'm going to set up my own company and I want to be co-located. So it does have this tendency economically to set up a local hub, because we know that people like to get information directly from other people, not always through publication. It solves, or it causes and solves another problem. One problem with open science or open sharing is it has a tendency to lead to groupthink. That is, some leaders in the field say, well, this is the right approach, and other people will follow. And there's some research to indicate this, that if you only have openness, then people will follow a certain pathway and maybe neglect a pathway that won't work. Open science partnerships provides one mechanism to control that, and that is by having a diversity of actors with different approaches looking at it, all trying to figure out at the end, how am I going to get a commercial benefit out of it, or at least the firms will. And so they're going to be collaborating internally, but competing externally. And this helps mitigate the cost of groupthink or the risk of groupthink. At the same time, we need to keep some cohesion, because if we have too diverse a set of actors, each going in their own direction, then we also undermine innovation, because we don't have a common language. We undermine each other. We don't really generate the novel ideas that come from people collaborating actively together. Open science partnerships are also designed to address the problem of incentives. So as I said before, if you're a firm, generally you're going after a patent. If you're an academic, you've got a few incentives, but some of them often tied to impact factor. And so we each have our own narrow set of incentives. What open science partnerships is putting all of these incentives together. So a firm, yes, wants to make money. An academic does want some impact, but they might be able to measure impact differently by actually bringing a drug, by being part of this consortium to help people. Philanthropies come in and have their own set of incentives in terms of addressing the issue in which they're interested. Governments are interested in reducing health costs, making sure that their citizens are healthy. And so we have a mixture of incentives. And so while any one incentive might lead to conduct we don't like or outcomes we don't like, having a mixture and rich set of incentives tends to mitigate that and helps us get over those problems. So open science partnerships, as I said, are a way to align the interests of everyone within the scope. So the limited scope of the project, not covering all research and science, but solving Alzheimer, allows us to really use those incentives within a certain context. It helps us avoid misaligning incentives. Now, governments can play an important role here. So they can have specific funding for open science. So collaborations that are multi-sectorial, have no IP, have radical sharing. They can also provide alternative incentives outside the patent system. And one we're looking at in Canada is regulatory data protection. So when you file a drug with your health authority and they give approval, no one else is allowed to sell that drug based on your data for a period of time, ranges from 5 to 10 years, depending on what jurisdiction you are in. And we've gone to the Canadian government, for example, and said, well, why don't you increase that protection if the entity trying to sell the drug agrees to share, not to get patents, and to certain price control. So there's things that governments can do to set up incentives to encourage these type of partnerships. Obviously, there's direct financial support through tax or other means, so firms that participate can get it. And you can also play around with your intellectual property rules. Make firms attain a higher quality of submission. So the standards of novelty and obviousness and utility could be increased or at least administered in a way that is keeping the patents narrower and therefore encouraging firms to participate. Okay, I want to talk about a few examples just before ending and allowing you to have your say. I had mentioned the Structural Genomics Consortium before. It is a public-private partnership founded in 2014. Wellcome Trust was a major contributor. Central campus is in Oxford. It's actually a UK charity, but has a lab in Toronto where its CEO is, has others at the Karolinska Institute in Sweden, in Frankfurt, and various other places around the world. Its original mandate was to come up with the 3D structures of proteins. It was funded by firms, large pharma, by governments, and philanthropies, and became a mechanism through which knowledge could be shared, including a tacit knowledge. Initially, the agreements did contemplate IP, but they never obtained any, and in their subsequent round, about over 10 years ago, they just completely dropped any IP and adopted an open science, explicit open science principles that do not allow for patenting. Its researchers are heavily involved with openness, including their, and sometimes led by postdocs who post their e-lab books frequently, weekly or daily, in order to radically share. The SGC, because of its success, has moved into other areas. It's developed probes, epigenetics, and is moving into areas like pandemics and Alzheimer's, et cetera, et cetera. It's also set up firms through the Agora Open Science Trust, a charity, so for-profit firms within this charity that take this knowledge using regulatory data protection, but no patents, to advance products forward. It's too early to, the life cycle is too long to know whether these work, but they're advancing and advancing well. Now, the SGC has done incredibly well. About 10% of all resolved protein structures in the world are a result of SGC researchers. And about a quarter of all non-clinical money coming into the University of Toronto from private firms goes to the SGC. So it's attracted a huge amount of interest by public-private sector and has really advanced the field. Another, which is in my hometown of Montreal, is the Montreal Neurological Institute and Hospital. Frustrated by the lack of advance in neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, where we haven't seen a first-in-class drug come out in many decades, the Neuro decided to go open science throughout its it's 60-some laboratories ranging from basic research to clinical research. Since then, it has generated about 5 times the funding, private funding, than it had before. So far from scaring off industry or others, people have been attracted to it. People apply to work at the Neuro and do research at the Neuro because it is open. It has been a huge success in just generating interest and allows them to enter into fields like, looking at all the genes that could be related to Parkinson's, the so-called dark genome. It allows them to start investigating that without having to worry that, will I get a publication or something else? There's so many different incentives at play that they're able to move ahead. And the last one I want to talk about, since we're living obviously through a pandemic, is the sea change that happened at least at the beginning of the pandemic, where we had radical sharing of information about the the RNA sequence or the sequence of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, and the quick development of vaccines and so on. That radical sharing shaved off much of the time that it took to develop the vaccines, and we're benefiting from that right now. But more generally showed that there is a problem in drug development. I've already outlined it at a high level: lack of productivity, increased cost. But we suddenly saw not only does that exist, but we can do something about it. We can overcome those costs by working together. And so we have set up in Canada VIMI, and if you're Canadian, you will know that that name has a certain meaning, to do drug research in the open. So open science drug development in 4 areas where there's particular lack of market pull. And that is pandemic preparedness, AMR, antibiotic resistance, rare diseases, and pediatric diseases. In each of these areas, the market is not getting firms to invest. The AMR, there's been an exodus of firms from that area, and no firm is willing to develop a pandemic-ready drug for a pandemic that might not happen or might happen on a different virus. But by sharing the risk across a number of entities, then there's the ability to do that. READY is a global consortium of which VIMI is part, narrowly focused on pandemic preparedness. So can we develop drugs now for the major viral families that are likely to cause the next pandemic? We can take them all the way to phase 1 to show that they're safe. When the next pandemic hits, and it will hit, we will have drugs that we could quickly take into phase 2, 3 trials and actually have drugs custom made for that virus, rather than trying a whole bunch of stuff that you've heard about in the news and promoted by some government officials that I won't name, that turned out not only to not work, but actually have harmful consequences. VIMI is also going to be providing assistance to firms who are willing to think outside the box. How do we build on an open infrastructure to build a business case and business strategy to move forward? So we're going to work with them using the experiences of the SGC and others. What this does is thickens the market, provides more routes to get from where we are to where we want to go. Those who want to go the classic patent route can do so, but if we provide alternatives and we can show that those alternatives work, we think we can increase openness and accelerate research at the same time. So just to end, open science partnerships are the next step, the next generation of open science. We've done a lot of work to get to the point we are today, and I have to congratulate you and everybody else who is involved with getting us to this point. But it's not enough. We can't stop here. We have to address freedom to operate. We have to control costs. We have to manage cohesion and groupthink and resist groupthink, and we need desperately to fix our incentive problems. If you're interested, I have an article that is freely available at that site. So thank you, and I'm hoping that Rachel comes back.
Hello, thank you.
There she is.
Thank you very much, Richard. That was really interesting, fascinating. And there are a couple of questions in the chat. And actually, you've touched on one, but I think, so I think there's a point about, so if we look at open science partnerships, you know, they're obviously a great concept. Do you have any perspectives on why this approach is not more widely used in the context of, for example, COVID-19 and pandemics? And in particular, when you're thinking about, you know, this is affecting everybody on the planet. So how do we adopt the approach more widely?
So in fact, it is happening. The problem is drug development doesn't happen in a year. So we would have had to do this 10 years ago to be prepared today. And what we're really trying to do through the VIMI and READY is prepare for the next one. We hope that it's at least 10 years off. No one knows. But there's a lot of interest. So we have lots of pharma interested in joining. In fact, they're creating a group. They're going to the G7 and have been talking about how we can develop knowledge. And, you know, they seem to want patents not to make money, but to ensure quality control. I'm less certain about that, but they're open to working with us who are not going to get patents. So we were able to do that. We're working with the Canadian government. We're hoping to have a funding decision soon. Senator Burr sent a letter in support. So there is enthusiasm. But it's something we would have had to do before. So really, we're planning for the next pandemic. The major roadblocks are the universities, to be frank, and somewhat governments. Philanthropies seem to get it, and you see increasing interest in open science in different forms. So CZI has a little bit of it. ASAP in Parkinson's looks like it's embracing a much more open science platform and partnership model. They're not the hard ones to convince. It's the university administrators, the top level, because they've been told for years that we're going to measure your success by the number of patents you generate. And what I've just said, we're not generating patents. So we have the wrong incentive structure at the university level. If we measured them on, well, how much are you contributing to society? Get away from impact factors, get away from counting patents and count things that actually affect people, then administrators will go there. But that's where we've seen the greatest resistance. When we're able to go to administration and say, we have money coming in, well, then they relent. They may not believe in open science, but they believe in money. So there are enough researchers out there, though, who are interested in open science and would like more opportunities. So they're not the problem. Firms have not been the problem. And even private donors. McGill's, one of the biggest donations to the Montreal Neurological Institute was a $20 million gift because they went open. So if we can overcome the incentives the governments impose, get them to actually start giving grants out, because that would be a great signal of the importance of open science, and then work on the university administrators, I think we can get there.
Thank you, Richard. So another question is around, are there any efforts that you're aware of to support developing world's participation in open science sharing?
We're talking about it. I mean, READY is aimed at doing that sharing. I'm in discussions with the OECD, but frankly, no one's going to move until some government comes along. I have great hopes for yours, Rachel, and saying, we think open science is a way forward. Doesn't exclude other methods. But if a government says, we're going to put real resources, I've noticed, you know, the Wellcome Trust has an open science competition, but it's relatively small. We need some government somewhere to take the lead. I would prefer it's the Canadian government because I'm Canadian, but I will take it if it's the UK or anywhere else. And I think once these grants happen and there's a signal, we will see that they work. Now, I could be wrong, right? If it doesn't work, then we know and we don't do this anymore. I'm not naive enough to think I know the answer. But we've got enough indications from the SGC. You know, there's in Aarhus, they have another open science partnership. There are a bunch of these emerging, but we need a government to say, let's take a chance and really innovate how we fund and think about innovation, and it will pay off for that country, even if it doesn't work, to show that they're a place where you can experiment. That's my pitch to you and your government.
Yeah, I think, I mean, one of the things I'd say to that that's really interesting at the moment, one of the main policy areas that I'm personally working on is really, you know, just the simple end of open science, so open access to publication. And one of the biggest barriers we have is actually even the lack of understanding in terms of, hang on, if this is open access publication, then does that actually restrict innovation, and a fear around? So I think, you know, there's a huge amount of work that needs to be done to understand how the patent system works, and the kind of tensions, and when you can open and when you can't open. Have you got any examples, I suppose, of practical frameworks that are in development that can aid that understanding and implementation?
Well, part of what VIMI is aiming to do is actually institutionalize that and get funding to talk to firms. I was just talking to a bunch of student venture capitalists. They don't put the money in, but they manage the fund, and they're really interested in alternatives. I think we need the broad education. And we need a few examples of people going forward, write them up. I keep hoping that empirical fact will drive people to make the right decisions. I'm getting, with age, or even more age, not doubting that sometimes, that we have all the facts, we know this is going to work, and people don't follow. I think we need a leader. We need a government to say, we're just going to do something differently, much in the same way that Israel innovated its innovation system and took wild chances in the 1960s and 70s, and look where it is. We need another country to say, look, we're hitting roadblocks. Our money is not going as far as it did. We're not achieving our results. Let's do something different. And I think if we can get a government, and they bring it to the OECD, and they bring it to other fora, I think we start to socialize the idea. But it's always those first few steps. Like, people look at the SGC, wildly successful, and yet, well, does that scale up? Well, I think it does, but until you try, we can't prove it.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Richard. That's really been a very interesting talk, an angle, I think, to introduce into this plenary. We're getting lots of thumbs up and hearts on the screen, so a lot of love. I will now hand over to Kevin. So thank you, Richard. It feels odd not being able to applaud.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
It does indeed, doesn't it? Yeah. It's one of the things we miss at these virtual events. Thanks, Rachel. I don't know how the rest of you feel. I feel just in the past hour, I've got a week's worth of information to digest, never mind what's happened in the rest of the plenary. So I'm Kevin Ashley, the Digital Curation Centre. I'm here just to say a few words on behalf of the Programme Committee before I hand over to Hilary Hanaho, and indeed we hear news of future RDA events. It's been an intense, but I hope productive week for many of us. And indeed, there's another day still to go. There's repeat sessions running tonight for other time zones, and co-located events going on tomorrow. I think lots of us involved in running this are a little more dishevelled, perhaps a little more frazzled than we were a few days ago, but we are holding up. I've got many people that deserve a word of thanks. But before I go into them, I really must single out Alex Delapalta of the DCC, whose organisational skills, her experience, her dedicated effort over the last 2 years of planning have really made all of this possible. And as I said, there are many others who thanks are due, and I'm really sorry I'm not going to be able to name them all individually. But I believe we're going to get the chance to see many of them shortly after I hand over to our Secretary General, Hilary. But I would like to say thanks then to all the staff at the DCC and to all of those at our co-hosts, UK Research and Information and JISC, who've worked with us on the planning and the delivery of this week's plenary. and also to all of those in the RDA Secretariat who've worked so closely with them. It's been a success that's been born of collaboration and working together in the spirit of what RDA is about. Sometimes it's slower to work together, sometimes it's a bit more frustrating, but in the end we go farther by doing so. I'll say thanks also briefly to my Chief Information Officer, Gavin, who gives me the freedom and the trust sometimes to pursue these crazy ideas and to take risks that perhaps sometimes we shouldn't. Thanks also to the RDA Council who accepted our proposal. It's been an honour and a privilege to host this plenary. As hosts, we've been involved with RDA since its creation, and we're really glad we've been able to give back to the organisation in this way. Thanks to all of you who've spoken, shared, supported and contributed, for your thanks and your patience with us. And we're sorry we weren't able to bring you all to the UK in person and to Edinburgh, but we hope alongside the serious business of the plenary, we've managed to bring a little bit of Edinburgh's culture to you. And with that, I'll hand over to Hilary.
Oh, thank you so much, Kevin. So I will clap for everyone else with all the hearts and the things. As always, it's a little emotional, isn't it? On this now, let me just check what you can see, please. So can you see my screen? And can you see it in slideshow? Because this is always... because I can't see what you see, but I will keep going and someone will tell me that it doesn't work at some point. Yeah. Right, so here we are wrapping up or sort of wrapping up, as Kevin said, an event that has been in the planning since September 2018, and that, as I said at the beginning, has been organised 3 times at least. And it's phenomenal what has been done. So just a few numbers for you. As you can see, we had 829 participants from 35 countries. They're our top 10 country participation. Amazing to see that the US, of course, given the time zone, of course, Australia and other parts of the world. So wonderful participation. I think it's almost a record, and this is one of the sad things about a virtual plenary is, of course, that we can't all be together. And I know we felt it, all of us, but it does facilitate the participation of people. So I think we won't ever not have a virtual component in an event again. What about meetings? Well, actually, this week, just this week, with the co-located events, all the different newcomers, social events, everything, we've 123 different meetings have been organised. So I think that's a phenomenal number of meetings. If you can, and you see there all the different sessions and things, and the work gone in behind the scenes to organise them is quite considerable. That would be on the backstage. Of course, in the front part of the stage, that means huge work by the chairs and the tab to organise those meetings and to facilitate them, and then for you for participating. And we really hope that the collaborative notes will continue on, that the content will be made available to all on the website, and that you know, this is just the start of the work. Yeah? So the poster competition winner, well, I've been informed that Discovering Fair Enabling Repositories by Robert Ulrich, Nina Weisweiler and Michael Witt, Re3 Data, has won. So congratulations to you. And the little icon on the corner of International Data Week means that you all get a free registration. That's our gift to you for winning this wonderful. But thank you to all the posters. Those of you who attended the poster 1 Minute Madness, it was really fascinating the other day. And then again, the 5 minutes today. So congratulations to you and to everybody. Thanks for sharing the posters, because I think it's a really insightful way for the community to see also what's going on. What about the leaderboard? Well, this is an interesting one. I'm going to have to chat to first place and work out do you go in and out of rooms? Is it all about +1s and chats? So we have 2 winners. The first, because Isabel is, of course, one of our co-chairs of TAB and has been obviously multitasking on millions of screens and millions of meetings. We did feel that it was slightly unfair not to give it to her, but unfair not to give it to the community. So we're also going to award Thomas a prize. So both of you get a registration to IDW, and thank you for your interactiveness on the board. The sponsors. So a very big thank you again to Gale, Libnov and Springer Nature. As I said, events cost money, a lot of money, and their support is very much appreciated and valued. To our hosts, DCC, UKRI and JISC, thank you so much for your really unbelievable energy and in the face of many different obstacles and barriers and choices that you had to make. I'd like to recognize the wonderful program committee. Some of the members you've seen on the screens just recently, maybe some not, and to the organizing committee. I'm going to stop screen sharing now because I would like to actually ask all the wonderful super staff to turn on their videos, please, because I would like to do a group snap photo, and I'd like the people to give you a virtual round of applause. So I think if you could all turn on your videos, all keep coming, please. All of you involved in the back office, Rachel, Juan, Chris, Patricia, Alex, there we go, Ryan, come on, I don't know all your names, but I would really like people to see how many of you are, and you deserve so much thanks from us for everything that you have done. And I know it's been a particularly taxing week, so you'll all be very happy tomorrow afternoon. Come on, there's more of you, surely. Bridget, where's Bridget? And Magdalena's there, Patricia's missing. And Katie, our poster organizer. Ryan, there's Superman. Come on, Venkat. Good for you. Joy. Okay, well, you're not all coming on, but I'll give it, who's missing, Kevin? You know them better than I do, so we can do this. VP.
There are so many, I think, not here, and I know I think it's struggling to bring everyone's video on. There's a lot of people trying to join at the moment. I can see Venkat, Magdalena, Yolanda, Megan all trying to join there.
Right, well, I'm going to ask you to do Cheese and VP16 or Juno, whichever you prefer, and look into your cameras because we'll do a happy snap. So, 3, 2, 1. Yay!
Yay!
Thank you so much, all of you. Thank you so much, really. Thank you is never enough. Yeah. Okay, so we go back to the screen sharing again. Now, let me see. Here we are. Gosh, after a week of Juno, I'm still not up with this. So I would like, Patricia was on there before, but I don't know if how many, I mean, I've done many events myself, like all of you in this pandemic time in the virtual, but I really have never seen such super socials like Patricia has organized for us. And it really was just a crescendo with the Witches Scots with Laura, Stuart yesterday, and then Patricia and our dancing, and a special thanks to Bridget and her son for joining in. So thank you, Patricia. You really are a wonder. And I suppose that if you decide to leave DCC, you have a future in Ceilidh dancing, definitely. Of course, you saw them before, but I always must thank the superstars, my super women of the Secretariat. There are 6 of them, I like to remind you, and they really go beyond the call of duty in their work. It's been particularly intense for us, these virtual plenaries. It's new for us too. It's unfair, as Kevin says, to single out anybody, but Alex is really, because not only does she work for DCC and therefore for the local organisers, but she's also on the Secretariat. So I leave it up to you to understand what that must mean for Alex. And I hope that tomorrow brings a rest for you, Alex, and some holidays and an RDA free brain for a while. So thank you so much to you, Alex, and to everybody else. Right, a few reminders before we move on. though we are closing and saying goodbye, there are the repeat sessions. So there are 3 repeat sessions, breakout 9, 10 and 11. There are the times taking place in UTC. And we have still have one more RDA question and answers drop in later on this evening. So check UTC what that means in your time zone. But that's Stephanie will be, and Mary I think will be available during that one. How they do it I do not know, but they will. Remember that we have the survey on individual membership fees open. Please give us your feedback. The council elections, you need to be logged in. That's a membership vote. The plenary evaluation and feedback, we need that feedback from you, and that will come very soon. Of course, you heard from Susan the wonderful news that NIH have just joined the Organizational Assembly family. We also received information that Taylor and Francis are joining us as well. So thank you, Matt, for that. And please think about it. It's a way of sustaining and helping us in RDA, and we really do appreciate that. But it's also a way of you showing that you support a bottom-up community initiative. A reminder that the recordings and things will be made available on Juno over the next few days, and then we transfer everything to the RDA website for posterity in the next few weeks. Okay, so anyone who has registered, you can log back in over the next coming days and see all the sessions that you missed. And so, what do I see? Yes, Twitter. Twitter is, I think we've all discovered that Twitter is a little quieter when with our virtual plenaries. I think we're all concentrating too much. And as somebody, I think it was Robin Rice, put in, actually, you're sort of also doing your daily business as usual. But I picked out a few. I really liked Mickey Lindler's Jamboard, which showed that idea that, you know, despite the virtual environment, there were clearly some really cool interactions. And I myself attended a great number of sessions where interactive tools were used. So thanks again, because that shows the preparation that the organizers of the sessions have put into it. I loved the Priyanka's note, so I highlighted there that not all data can and should be open, and that's why it's important to have these conversations at the Research Data Alliance. And Varsha's one about how, you know, so many smart people in the room and all the new things, and they're just a small example, I think, of the wonderful family and community that you all are in RDA. So thank you. A quick shout out for those of you in the Australasia area. ARDC are very kindly going to be doing a virtual event to follow up on some of the topics shown and discussed at RDA. Watch out, the dates aren't quite finalized yet, but it will be in mid-May. So watch out for the updates from Twitter, the RDA website, and the RDA in Australia group. Yeah. So thanks to ARDC, who, by the way, are our Australian champions, and they support RDA Global and have a program running. So we're very grateful to them for that. So as Laura said, showed to us, we're all Jock Tamson's bairns, as it said. So we're all the same, or we're all in this together. Thank you all for joining us this week for the Virtual Plenary 17. And I haven't finished yet, but I will. Usually we pass the Olympic baton. And so we are all in this together. And I really appreciate you all being with us this week in whatever time zone you were in and whatever contribution you were able to make. And we look forward to many more of them. One of which is the next event, of course, around the corner is International Data Week. And I would like to see if Simon Hodson is with us here. And if he is, then he can, there you are, Simon, how nice to see you. If he can turn on his video and his microphone. Simon, well, so International Data Week is an event that we, RDA, is involved in. But as you've heard me speaking for a long while, Simon, before we show the video of International Data Week, would you tell everybody a little bit about the history of IDW, and then we'll talk about SciDataCon and RDA after the video.
Okay, thanks very much, Hilary. I'm Simon Hodson, Executive Director of CoData. International Data Week is a collaboration between the Research Data Alliance, of course, but also my organization, CODATA, which is the Committee on Data of the International Science Council, and another organization convened by the International Science Council called the World Data System. Now, I'm sure a lot of people in this community will be familiar with those organizations. We felt it was an important thing to have a full community event combining the Research Data Alliance Plenary with the long-running conference series that CODATA and the WDS have organized. So that's International Data Week. That's what that is. It's a combined conference with the RDA Plenary and with SciDataCon, which is the CODATA and WDS conference. The first edition was in Denver. Many of you, I'm sure, will remember that in 2016. We had 840 participants there. And the second edition was in Botswana, in Gaborone, in 2018. And I'm sure many of you have fond memories of that. And again, another large conference with 850 face-to-face participants. So the next edition is in November later this year. It's hosted in Seoul by our partners in South Korea. But of course, in the context of the pandemic, it will be a hybrid event. We very much hope there will be participants locally in Seoul and anyone who can get there from the region or with their vaccine passport, etc. But we will make sure that there will be full participation in a virtual hybrid environment. We're working with our colleagues in South Korea to make sure that that's as effective as possible.
Thanks, Simon. And while Megan cues up the video, I think she's going to show us the video, I would like to also give a quick shout out, if I may, for Rory Edmonds. Simon, Rory, Simon and I worked in a great collaboration with our Seoul colleagues. And of course, Rory has passed on the baton to the new WDS IPO, but we're grateful to him for everything that he's done. And we hope to see him in Seoul then. And of course, WDS continue their adventure with us. But Megan, go ahead. I can't hear any sound. Checkbox share audio. Oh my goodness, it's not sharing the sound for us, I'm afraid. Oh, working on it. Okay. Right.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff Shim, and I would like to say a few words about the International Data Week 2021 on behalf of the local organizing committee. The 18th IDA Plenary will be held as part of the International Data Week 2021. The event will take place from the 8th to 11th of November this year, and it'll be in Seoul, Korea. In several ways, the next IDA Plenary is going to be a special one, because it'll be two exciting events into one. IDW2021 is IDA Plenary Meeting, SciDataCon combined into one super event. IDA, CODATA, and World Data System organize the event. In addition, IDW has its own plenary sessions and exciting events. When you register for IDW 2021, you can join all the IDA meetings and SciDataCon and IDW events. This is the third IDW conference. The first IDW was held in Denver, Colorado in 2016, and the second in Gaborone, Botswana 2018, both of which attracted more than 800 data experts and professionals all around the world. This year's IDW will be held in Seoul, Korea, as well as online. 6 local organizations have joined forces to co-host the event with IDA, CODATA, and WDS. These are major government research institutes, the National Library of Korea, and a comprehensive research university founded in 1398. As you can see, this year's IDW Conference theme is Data to Improve Our World. Now, when it comes to keynote speakers, I know that you have high expectations, having heard from top experts in the field. You can expect to hear from world leaders and innovators in keynote speeches, panel discussions along the 6 conference topics. Now, due to the current COVID-19 situations at the moment, the conference will run in a hybrid format, offering both physical and virtual participation. The on-site participation is subject to a number of factors, but we'll have to wait and see. We're hopeful that the situation will only improve in the second half of the year. In the meantime, we're putting a lot of efforts into making the virtual part of the conference as engaging as the physical or on-site participation. When the fully functioning conference website becomes available with open registration, you will be the first one to be notified. This is a general overview of the program. More detailed conference program will be available on the conference website. Now, here are the nice photos of the venue where the on-site event will take place. There might be many reasons why you want to attend the IDW 2021. One may be that simply it's the next LDA plenary. But I hope that I made a case here that is more than that. IDW 2021 is the premier event that addresses frontier issues of data in research that you do not want to miss out. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you all in November at the conference.
The new wave of culture starts with K. K-culture, including K-pop and K-drama, K-fashion, K-food, unfortunately, even K-quarantine. And now, K-data. In Seoul, the center of K-culture and 5,000 years of history, the 3rd International Data Week begins to take a quantum leap to the data-driven future. International Data Week 2021. The 3rd journey of the International Data Week will begin in Seoul, Korea in 2021, after successful events in Denver, USA in 2016, followed by Gaborone, Botswana in 2018. Under the theme of Data to Improve Our World, we will emphasize the importance of data, considered the driver of the 4th Industrial Revolution. From around the globe, data experts including researchers, librarians, and IT professionals will gather in Seoul to discuss ways to transform our world through data in various and different fields such as research data governance, openness, sharing and infrastructure, and so on. International Data Week is convened by 3 global data organizations, CODATA, the Research Data Alliance, and the World Data System. 3 organizations with a shared vision to improve our world through data. Hosted by 6 organizations including KISTI, and sponsored by the Ministry of Science and ICT, the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism, the Seoul Metropolitan Government, the National Research Council of Science and Technology, and the National Assembly Library of Korea. IDW 2021 will take place in a wonderful venue with convenient facilities. For the conference and for relaxation, IDW 2021 will be held at both Seoul Dragon City, the first lifestyle hotel complex in Korea, and Seom-seven, floating island on the Han River. Conveniently located near Yongsan Station and featured with 4 individual hotels, Seoul Dragon City is first-class venue with spacious grand ballrooms and meeting rooms. You will create fun and lasting memories of IDW 2021 at the conference banquet held on the 3rd day at Seom-seven, 3 remarkable giant artificial islands floating on the center of the Han River. By jointly holding the 18th RDA Plenary Meeting and SciDataCon 2021, The IDW 2021 is particularly special in its scale and significance. IDW 2021 will run for a total of 9 days, from November 6th to 14th. The main conference will take place from November 8th to 11th, with many important events before and after these dates. Data to improve our world. Through openness and sharing of useful and high-quality data. Data that is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. We can make a better world. IDW 2021 will be an intense and creative forum for data experts to respond to major global challenges, including addressing climate change, controlling disease, reducing disaster risk, and achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. IDW 2021 in Seoul, Korea. The meeting of K-Data and international data starts now.
Thanks, Megan, for the video. If Simon is still there, I'll put up the slides on SciDataCon, Simon, so we can see. You can talk to the. Can you see that?
I can, Hilary. Thank you. So I'll just give a quick alert to people about deadlines in relation to SciDataCon. So thanks very much for this opportunity to mention SciDataCon. We've got deadlines coming up, which is why we wanted to do this in this plenary session. As I mentioned earlier, International Data Week combines the two conferences. So there'll be the two tracks throughout the event, as Jeff, our wonderful partner in South Korea, said. For SciDataCon, it provides something, I think, which is complementary to and synergistic with what goes on in a Research Data Alliance plenary. So it's an opportunity. We have a number of different types of sessions, but it's an opportunity, at least, to organize sessions which are a little bit more formal and traditional, where you present your research outputs and your activities, your practice. But we also have panel sessions and workshop sessions as well. It's traditionally, of course, organized by CoData and the World Data System. So our task groups and working groups and activities in the World Data System organize sessions. But I want to emphasize it's absolutely not a closed conference for those two organizations. It's really for the whole global data community. The themes are those of the larger conference. So data to improve our world and all the sub-themes which were mentioned in the video by Jeff, as well as, of course, the traditional themes that we address: issues of data science, issues of data stewardship, issues of research data management more generally. Something as well which I think is distinctive in SciDataCon is because of our partnership with the International Science Council, we do engage with themes that are of interest for particular domains, those represented by international scientific unions, which are members of CoData and of the International Science Council, and also with the large grand challenge issues that are addressed by the UN system. So things like the Sustainable Development Goals. What are the data requirements for the Sustainable Development Goals? What are the data requirements for disaster risk reduction, and so on? So if you think about those global programs under the UN auspices, under the auspices of the International Science Council, things like Future Earth, integrated research on disaster risk, those themes are very much part of SciDataCon as well. So the important message, please do consider preparing a session proposal for SciDataCon, explore that side of the International Data Week as well. The deadline for session proposals is the 30th of April. Following that, we will ask for individual session organizers and the people that they've invited to speak, or anyone else to submit an individual proposal for a presentation, and those will be worked into the existing sessions or into thematically organized sessions as well. And the deadline for that for the presentations will be the 31st of July, as they're on the slide. So I think that's the key message that I want to give about SciDataCon, Hilary.
That's great.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to do that.
Thank you, Simon, also because we know you mean well. So it's nice to see you, and thanks for coming to tell us about this. It's important, and it's really great. It is a great event together. We've had a great experience in Botswana and in Denver. So I'm really looking forward to it. Hopefully, as Jeff said, we'll be able to get there in person. I think we've decided on the organizing committee that we probably have to make a decision by the end of August. So fingers crossed that we will be able to do a hybrid event and not just fully virtual, but we'll watch this space. Just very quickly, you know what happens in plenary meetings if you're here, so I'm not going to tell you, but this is more or less our timeline for the breakout for the call for breakout sessions. So you see, we finish one and we start another. The 10th of May, more or less, is what we've agreed, and you'll have then till the early July to propose your sessions. But as you have all the momentum now, you might think about it while you're polishing off your notes and your things, and think about what you would like to submit for the 18th plenary meeting at IDW 2021. And remember that it will be virtual. In any case, there will be a virtual element to it. So you can clearly make a decision on physical presence if and when it's possible. So that's wraps it up for IDW 2021. What about 2022? Well, you're going to have to keep watching this space for that. We have some ideas, we have some discussions ongoing, but no firm plans yet. It's also true that, as I told you, all of the previous 3 virtual plenaries were, if you like, planned way in advance. And perhaps it's a good thing that for 2022 we hadn't got some plans, because we have also the experience of the people who have had to organize and reorganize and reorganize. Certainly something will happen, and you'll be the first to know when we do. But in true IDW style, we do have the dates for IDW 2023. So we already know that will take place on the 23rd to the 26th of October in Salzburg. This will be our first European IDW, International Data Week, a festival of data. So I'm going to stop sharing again. I think Megan is going to show us a video, and then we'll be joined by we'll be joined by some of our colleagues from the IDW 2023 Programme Committee to talk for a brief minute. Thanks, Megan.
Welcome to the International Data Week IDW 2023 in the beautiful festival city of Salzburg. I'm Arne Bartke, Dean of the Faculty of Natural Sciences, and we're looking forward to welcome you here for a festival of data.
The University of Salzburg is proud to develop a strong emphasis on digital sciences and technologies. Empirical evidence from all kinds of disciplines contribute to a huge amount of data which has to be analyzed to generate data products supporting decisions in all walks of society and industry. With my own background in geoinformatics, we are proud to contribute to this academic development as well as to the International Data Week of 2023.
Salzburg, a magnificent Baroque city on the northern edge of the Alps at the heart of Europe. The 500-year regency of the prince-bishops left an indelible mark. Today, the historical town is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, offering a marvelous combination of tradition and modernity, urban flair and verdant charm. Salzburg is a city of music and the festival, an information hub and one of the world's most popular tourist destinations. Salzburg Airport offers excellent international flight connections, and every year, fast trains bring over 1.5 million guests to the home of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart and the sound of music. Salzburg Congress is located in the heart of the city, right next to the world-famous Mirabell Gardens. The facility upholds Salzburg's long tradition as a venue for European scientific and medical congresses. The 5-story Congress Center is a sophisticated work of architecture that impresses with design clarity, purest facilities, and maximum versatility. Interior design variability and the lack of proprietary branding ensure there's plenty of space for individuality. The technological infrastructure meets the highest standards and is the most modern of its kind in the whole of Austria. Most importantly, above and beyond the facilities and technical infrastructure, it's the team here that fills Salzburg Congress with life. Since it opened, a well-rehearsed team at the venue has faced every challenge in a friendly and intelligent manner, and with plenty of the charm Salzburg is known for. Salzburg Congress, the charming way to succeed.
Joseph, how nice to see you. Have you got your voice on there, Joseph?
I do,
Oh,
at least in the real world.
Yes, so we just wanted to invite Joseph and I think Arne as well to join us to say hello. And we saw you at both at the beginning of the video. Both of them are professors at the University of Salzburg. And just give you a few words to speak to our wonderful RDA community and so they know where and they'll be doing in, what is it, 2 years time.
Yeah. So we should keep it short. It says on the bottom of the screen we're past 8
we
minutes
are.
and 46 seconds. So I thought that Sepp and I would just basically say we're real, we do exist, and we hope that this conference will be in presence. What you saw at the beginning of the nice video was really a view from that conference site towards the city and towards the fortress of Salzburg. This has been a really impressive conference. I've been following for the last couple of hours, and we hope it will be as impressive in Salzburg.
Yeah.
I hope to see you all there.
Thank you so much, Arne. Yeah, well, and it'll be even more because as you heard Simon before, you get the Scidatathon and the RDA together. So it's a week of intense data discussions. Okay, Joseph, do you want to say a word?
Very brief comment from my side. After a lot of virtual experiences we had, my background being a geographer, we definitely want to hope to bring everyone back into the real world. And well, where our data come from, we need to put them into context. Whatever happens somewhere. And we definitely hope that the 23 event will happen in the real world of Salzburg. We look forward.
Thanks so much, Josie. Yes, I think everybody feels the same. Everybody feels the same. But thank you so much for coming to see us. And of course, we hope that perhaps if we are in Korea in person, you will come and see what it really is like. And we would really appreciate that. So thanks very much. Okay, so let's see, where am I now? Okay, well, I'm back. So I won't share my screen. So that's sort of it. I think there is a Scottish tradition that when you end a meeting, certain tunes are played, and Patricia, our social organizer, has it all down to a T. So I will leave it with that. I will just say goodbye and thank you again. I really hope that the next time I see you all will be in person at a plenary, but thank you very, very, very much. Kevin, all the team, Rachel, Juan, Chris, everybody, thank you so much. Off you go, Patricia.